I woke up from a 9-hour spine surgery thinking the worst was over. I was wrong. When I opened my eyes, my phone was vibrating nonstop. 73 missed calls. And one voicemail that changed everything. My father's voice was calm when he said it. We sold your condo while you were unconscious. $425,000. Gone. Signed in my name. While I was on an operating table, they thought I would wake up, forgive them, and smile at my sister's wedding. They had no idea what I was about to do next. I should have known something was wrong the moment I opened my eyes. Not because of the pain. The pain I expected. 9 hours of spine surgery doesn't end gently. It doesn't leave you feeling refreshed or hopeful. It leaves you hollowed out, drained, like your body belongs to someone else. But the pain wasn't the first thing I noticed. It was the silence. No familiar voices. No, we're right here. Just the quiet hum of hospital machines and the faint smell of antiseptic in the air. My name is Mila. I'm 30 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I trusted my parents with everything, including my future. The surgery had been scheduled fast, too fast. Months of nerve pain had turned into numbness. Numbness turned into weakness. Weakness turned into fear. If we don't operate soon, my doctor told me, you could lose permanent mobility. Permanent. That word doesn't leave room for delay. So I signed the consent forms. I packed a hospital bag. I tried not to think about worst-case scenarios. The night before the surgery, my parents sat beside my hospital bed. My mother cried softly, holding my hand like I was 5 years old again. My father leaned close and said, "Don't worry about anything. We'll take care of things while you focus on getting better." I believed him. I handed over my phone before they wheeled me into the operating room. I remember the ceiling lights passing above me in slow rhythm. I remember counting backwards from 10, and then nothing. Until I woke up. The first breath felt like inhaling glass. My throat burned. My back throbbed. My body felt stitched together with fire. I tried to move my legs. They responded. Barely. Relief mixed with pain in a strange way. I wasn't paralyzed. That should have been the headline of the day. It wasn't. Because when I turned my head slightly, I saw my phone on the small table beside my bed, and it wouldn't stop vibrating. Over and over. The screen lit up the dim recovery room like a warning signal. I blinked slowly, trying to focus. My hands felt heavy, but I reached for it anyway. 73 missed calls. 73. My heart began pounding so fast I thought the machines might start beeping. Nobody gets 73 missed calls unless something terrible has happened. For one split second, I thought someone had died. My chest tightened as I unlocked the screen. Most of the calls were from my dad. Some from my mom. A few from my sister. There was one voicemail. Just one. My fingers trembled as I pressed play. "Mila, sweetheart." My father's voice came through, oddly calm. Too calm. "We handled everything. You were unconscious, so we signed for you. We sold your condo to pay for your sister's wedding. It's done." It was the only way. I stared at the wall in front of me. I heard the words, but my brain refused to process them. Sold. Your condo. Unconscious. Signed for you. The room felt like it tilted slightly to the left. Then he said the number. 425,000. It covered everything. Everything. My condo wasn't just an apartment. It wasn't just walls and windows and a parking spot. It was my safety. I bought it at 26, after years of saving. While my friends were traveling, I was picking up overtime. While they were upgrading phones, I was paying down principal. Every paycheck felt like progress. Every mortgage payment felt like proof. Proof that I could stand on my own. Proof that I didn't need to depend on anyone. And while I was lying on an operating table, cut open and unconscious, my parents decided to erase it. I tried to sit up. The pain shot through my spine like electricity. A broken sound escaped my throat. Not quite a scream, not quite a sob. The nurse rushed in. "Easy," she said gently. "You just had major surgery." "Right." I swallowed hard. "Can you help me sit up?" I whispered. She hesitated but adjusted the bed slowly. Every inch felt like punishment. But I needed to make a call. I needed to hear him say it again. To confirm this wasn't anesthesia confusion. When my father answered, He sounded relieved. Oh, good. You're awake. Mila, everything worked out perfectly. How? I asked slowly, fighting to keep my voice steady. Did you sell my condo while I was in surgery? A pause. Then he said it like it was obvious. We're family. You would have agreed. There it was. That sentence. The one that changes everything. Not, we're sorry. Not, we panicked. Not, we made a mistake. You would have agreed. As if consent could be guessed. As if my silence under anesthesia was the same as approval. My mother's voice came into the call then. We couldn't risk delays, she said softly. The venue needed confirmation. Your sister has been so stressed. I almost laughed. I was lying in a hospital bed, barely able to move, tubes in my arms, stitches in my back, and they were talking about stress. I hung up, because if I didn't, I would have said something I couldn't take back. Tears slid down into my pillow, quiet and steady. Not dramatic, not loud, just heavy. You were unconscious, so we signed for you. They said it like that made sense. Like my body being cut open gave them permission to cut into my future. I stared at the ceiling for a long time after that, and slowly, through the pain and shock, one thought became clear. This wasn't just about money. This was about how easily they replaced my voice with their own. And if they believed I would wake up, forgive them, and smile at the wedding like nothing happened, then they didn't know me at all. Because the surgery may have left me weak, but it also woke something up inside me. And this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. The first night after surgery, I didn't sleep. Not because of the pain. The painkillers handled that part. It was my thoughts that refused to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's voice again. You were unconscious, so we signed for you. He said it like it was logical, responsible, loving even. But the more I replayed it, the more something ugly surfaced beneath it. They didn't panic. They didn't misunderstand paperwork. They made a decision. And they made it calmly. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds in thin stripes across the floor. I watched the dust move in the air, slow and quiet. No one from my family had come by, not to check on me, not to explain, not to apologize. I reached for my phone again, this time more carefully. There were new messages. From my sister. I know this looks bad, but it's just timing. You would have said yes anyway. Please, don't ruin this for me. I was the one who had been cut open. I was the one who could have lost the ability to walk properly. And somehow, I was the threat. The problem? The potential ruin. That's when a memory surfaced. I was 14 years old. My sister had forgotten to turn in a school project. She cried at the dinner table, said the teacher hated her, said it wasn't fair. My mom stayed up all night helping her redo it. The next week, I forgot a math worksheet. My dad looked at me and said, "You're smart. You don't need hand-holding." At the time, I took it as a compliment. I was the capable one, the independent one, the one who didn't need rescuing. But as I lay there in that hospital bed, I saw it differently. I wasn't the strong one. I was the convenient one. They didn't worry about me because they assumed I would adjust, adapt, absorb. When my sister switched college majors 3 times, they paid the extra tuition. When she wanted a fresh start in a new city, they helped with deposits. When she overspent on vacations, they quietly cleared the balance. When I worked overtime to save for a down payment, they told me, that's what responsible adults do. When I bought my condo at 26, they congratulated me. But it wasn't pride. It was relief. Relief that I didn't ask them for anything. And now, years later, they decided I still didn't need to be asked, because I'd understand. That word. Understand. I suddenly realized something painful. They didn't see me as someone to protect. They saw me as a resource. The hospital door opened softly. A nurse stepped in with a clipboard. How's your pain level today? I almost laughed. On a scale of 1 to 10. Physically, maybe a 6. Emotionally, I didn't have a number high enough. It's manageable, I said quietly. She adjusted my IV and gave me a sympathetic smile. Family coming by later? I hesitated. They're busy with my sister's wedding, I replied. Even saying it out loud made my chest tighten. Busy. That word again. Busy planning flowers, busy tasting cake samples, busy spending money that wasn't theirs. Later that afternoon, I asked the hospital staff for something specific. I need copies of any paperwork related to my personal assets, I said. The social worker looked slightly confused, but nodded. Of course. Is everything okay? No, but I didn't say that. Instead, I requested documentation of the sale. Within 2 days, the email arrived. I opened it slowly. There it was, the sales agreement, the transfer confirmation, and my signature. Except it wasn't mine. It looked close, close enough that someone unfamiliar wouldn't notice. But I knew my handwriting. The curve of the M was tighter than I usually write it. The tail of the last letter cut short. It was rushed, imitated, forged. The authorization timestamp matched the exact hour I was in surgery. Sedated, unconscious, unable to consent. I felt something inside me go still. Not explosive anger, not screaming rage, just clarity. Cold and steady. They didn't wait because they didn't feel they had to. They believed I'd accept it. They believed I'd prioritize family peace over my own stability. And the most painful part? They were basing that belief on history. Because I always did. When my sister borrowed money and delayed paying it back, I let it go. When my parents used part of my savings years ago for a temporary family emergency and repaid it late without apology, I told myself it wasn't worth drama. When they minimized my promotions at work but celebrated my sister's engagement party like a royal event, I smiled anyway. I kept peace. And peace taught them something dangerous: that my boundaries were flexible, that my silence was permission, that my strength meant unlimited access. But lying there in that hospital bed, staring at the forged version of my name, I realized something important. Strength without boundaries becomes exploitation, and I was done being the easy daughter. My phone buzzed again. A group chat notification. Pictures of wedding centerpieces. Color palette discussions. A poll about table arrangements. No one asked if I needed help showering. No one asked if I was scared. They asked if I was coming to the bridal fitting next week. I turned my phone face down, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about not responding. Because something had shifted. The surgery was supposed to fix my spine, but it also corrected something else. My vision. I could see the pattern now. Clear. Unfiltered. And if they thought I would wake up, adjust, and quietly accept that my life savings had become wedding decor, they were about to learn something new about me. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about keeping peace. I was thinking about keeping proof. And this time, I wasn't going to be convenient. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, I could walk, but barely. Each step felt like my spine was being reminded of what it had survived. I moved slowly, carefully, like the ground itself couldn't be fully trusted. Maybe that's why everything felt symbolic, because trust was the real injury. My parents didn't come to pick me up. They said they were finalizing vendor payments. Vendor payments with money that was frozen, with money that legally wasn't theirs. A friend from work drove me home instead. She kept glancing at me like she wanted to ask questions but didn't know how. "You okay?" she asked gently as the car hit a small bump in the road. The jolt shot pain through my back, but I nodded anyway. "I will be." When I stepped back into my condo, the condo they thought was no longer mine, I felt something shift in my chest. It still smelled like my lavender candle. The couch was still angled toward the window the way I liked. The small scratch on the hallway wall from when I moved in was still there. This place wasn't just property. It was evidence of effort. Every corner held proof of sacrifice, and they signed it away like it was a spare pen. I sat down slowly, back brace stiff against my ribs, and opened my laptop. If they believed I had nothing left, they were wrong. Years ago, quietly, without telling anyone, I made a decision. It happened after something small, small enough that no one else would remember it. My sister had asked my parents to co-sign a business loan for a boutique she wanted to open. They agreed immediately, celebrated her ambition, supported her risk. A few weeks later, I asked if they could co-sign a refinance option for my mortgage to lower my interest rate. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't dramatic. It would have saved me money long term. My father didn't even hesitate. "We can't risk our credit," he said. "You're stable. You'll figure it out. You'll figure it out." That sentence again. At the time, I smiled and said it was fine. But that night, I opened a separate savings account. I started moving money quietly, small amounts at first, then larger ones. Not because I didn't trust them completely, but because something inside me knew I needed insulation, protection, a safety net that didn't rely on anyone else's approval. 5 years ago, I bought a second property, a small house across town. Nothing flashy. No one in my family ever visited. No one asked about it, because I never mentioned it. It was fully paid off, only my name on the deed, no shared access, no assumptions. I bought it for peace of mind. I never expected to actually need it. Until now. As I opened the digital file containing the deed, I felt something steady settle inside me. They thought they'd taken my security. They thought they'd stripped me down to nothing, but they only took what they knew about. They underestimated my quiet planning, and that realization changed everything. 3 days after returning home, still moving stiffly, still adjusting to the brace, I made a phone call. Not to my parents, not to my sister, to a lawyer. My voice didn't shake the way I expected it to. "I need to know if I have options," I said. He listened carefully as I explained everything: the surgery, the voicemail, the forged signature, the timestamp during anesthesia. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. Then he said something simple. "Mila, this isn't a family misunderstanding. This is fraud." The word landed differently than I expected. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't explosive. It was precise, clean, clear. "They signed legal documents while you were medically incapacitated," he continued. "That's not a gray area." For weeks, my parents made it sound like I was overreacting, like I was emotional, like I was choosing money over family. But hearing the situation described without emotion, without manipulation, felt grounding. "What can I do?" I asked. "You can freeze the funds," he said. "And based on your medical records, you have strong standing." Strong standing. Another phrase I wasn't used to hearing in family discussions. That week, paperwork started moving. Quietly, strategically. Medical documentation was requested. Transaction records examined. Authorization logs pulled. The buyer of my condo was notified of the dispute. The bank flagged the account where the funds had been transferred, and just like that, the money they thought was already spent became unavailable. Frozen. Suspended mid-celebration. I didn't announce it. I didn't confront them. I stayed silent, let them believe I was still overwhelmed, still weak, still processing. Because this time, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. The wedding was less than 2 weeks away. My phone filled with group messages about final fittings and guest lists. My sister texted me a color swatch and asked which dress I preferred. Not once did she mention the condo. Not once did she ask how my recovery was going. It was like we were living in two separate realities. In hers, the only inconvenience was delayed payments. In mine, the people I trusted most had rewritten my consent while I was unconscious. And now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to smooth it over. I wasn't going to absorb the damage quietly. Because they believed something about me that was no longer true. They believed I would always prioritize harmony over fairness. They believed I would always choose silence over consequence. They believed wrong. And as I closed my laptop that night, braced tight around my back, something felt steady inside me. Not anger, not revenge, but resolve. They had no idea about the second house. They had no idea how prepared I actually was. They thought the story ended when they sold my condo. They had no idea it was just beginning. 9 days before the wedding, the illusion cracked. I was sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open, ice pack resting against my lower back, when my phone lit up with my father's name. For a moment, I just stared at it. I already knew why he was calling. The bank had moved. The freeze had gone through. The $425,000 that had been sitting comfortably in the wedding account was no longer accessible. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello. What did you do?" he demanded immediately. No greeting. No small talk. Just accusation. I leaned back slowly in my chair, careful not to twist my spine. I'm not sure what you mean, I said evenly. The bank froze the funds. The venue is calling. Vendors are asking questions. What did you tell them? His voice wasn't calm this time. It wasn't cheerful. It was tight, controlled panic. I told them the truth, I replied. That I was unconscious when the sale was authorized. Silence. Then a sharp exhale. You're blowing this out of proportion. Out of proportion. I glanced down at the faint scar line visible above the edge of my brace. 9 hours in surgery, weeks of recovery ahead. And somehow, I was dramatic. I didn't authorize the sale, I said quietly. We're family, he snapped. You would have agreed. There it was again. That sentence, like if he repeated it enough, it would become retroactive consent. No, I said firmly. You decided that for me. His tone shifted then, from defensive to irritated. Do you understand what this is doing to your sister? Guests are flying in, contracts are signed. This is humiliating. Humiliating. Interesting word choice. Not illegal, not unethical. Humiliating. Because the real problem in his mind wasn't what they did. It was that people might find out. I closed my eyes for a second and let the calm settle in. Weeks ago, this conversation would have shattered me. Now, it clarified things. Did you understand what you were doing to me while I was in surgery? I asked. He didn't answer. Not directly. You're being selfish, he muttered. Selfish? For protecting my own property. For challenging forged documents. For asking for basic consent. If selfish meant refusing to be used, then maybe I was. I'm not canceling the wedding, I said. I'm correcting a crime. He hung up on me. The next call came an hour later. My mother. Her voice was softer. Mila, sweetheart, can we talk? We are talking. She sighed. Things are spiraling. The florist is asking for confirmation. The venue says they need immediate payment or they'll downgrade the package. Downgrade. So that's what this was about. Not remorse, not reflection. Damage control. You should have waited for me to wake up, I said calmly. We didn't have time, she insisted. The booking window was closing. I let that sit for a moment. They operated on my spine, I replied quietly. But you couldn't wait 24 hours. Her silence was the loudest part of the conversation. After we hung up, I placed my phone face down on the table. My hands weren't shaking anymore. That surprised me. A week ago, I could barely hold the phone steady without anger spilling out of me. Now I felt something colder, stronger, clarity. By the next morning, the ripple effects had started. The buyer of my condo had contacted their agent. They were nervous. No one wants to own property tangled in a fraud investigation. My lawyer reassured them. This is procedural, he told me later, but the sale is on unstable ground. Unstable ground. I almost laughed at the irony. My spine was reinforced with surgical hardware. Their financial plans were not. By afternoon, my sister called. She didn't bother with hello. You're jealous, she said immediately. The word landed like an old accusation pulled from storage. Of what? I asked calmly. Of me. Of this wedding. You've always acted like you're above it, but you're ruining it. Ruining it. I looked around my quiet condo, the space I fought to own, the place they signed away without asking. Was I ruining it while I was under anesthesia? I asked. She faltered. That's different. No, I said gently. It's not. She began crying. Loud. Frustrated. You could have just let it go. There it was again, the expectation that I would absorb the damage quietly, that I would sacrifice stability for harmony. I've let a lot of things go, I replied. Not this. She hung up. An hour later, my group chat with extended family lit up. Subtle messages. Family disagreements should stay private. Is this really worth public embarrassment? Weddings only happen once. No one asked if I was walking without assistance yet. The only urgency was financial. That evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it slowly. My father stood there. He looked different, less confident, like the ground beneath him wasn't as stable as he'd assumed. He stepped inside without being invited. What are you trying to prove? He demanded. That I'm not a signature, I answered. He ran a hand through his hair. You're humiliating this family. I met his eyes. You sold my condo while I was unconscious. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said something that revealed everything. We thought you'd understand. And in that moment, I realized something painfully simple. They didn't think I was weak. They thought I was predictable, predictably accommodating, predictably quiet. But something had shifted. And as he stood there waiting for me to back down, I didn't. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to keep peace. I was protecting proof. And the money disappearing from that account, that wasn't revenge. It was gravity, consequences, pulling everything back to where it legally belonged. They thought the crisis was the wedding being downgraded. They didn't realize the real shift was happening in me. And this time, there was no going back. 2 days before the wedding, everything collapsed. Not dramatically, not with sirens or shouting in the streets, but quietly, legally, officially. And that made it worse for them. I was sitting on my couch, going through my physical therapy exercises, when my lawyer called. It's moving faster than expected, he said. I straightened slightly. What does that mean? The buyer's attorney reviewed the medical timeline. They're cooperating. The bank has officially locked the full amount pending investigation. Your parents cannot access it. I closed my eyes. The full amount. All $425,000. Frozen. Not partially delayed. Not temporarily restricted. Locked. They can't touch it? I asked. Not without court clearance. And based on the evidence, that's unlikely. I let out a slow breath. I didn't realize I'd been holding. Up until that moment, part of me feared this would somehow slip through. That family connections or emotional pressure would override paperwork. But documents don't bend for tears. Timestamps don't adjust for guilt. And medical records don't lie. Thank you, I said quietly. After I hung up, I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just sat there, absorbing the weight of what was happening. For the first time in my life, I wasn't negotiating my own boundaries. I was enforcing them. An hour later, my doorbell rang. I knew before I looked through the peephole, my father. When I opened the door, he didn't storm in. This time, he stood there stiffly. What did you file? He asked. His tone wasn't angry. It was strained. I filed the truth, I replied. His jaw tightened. The accounts are locked. The venue is threatening cancellation. That sounds stressful, I said evenly. He stared at me like I'd just insulted him. You're doing this on purpose. Yes, I said. The honesty surprised both of us. Yes, I am. He blinked. You would destroy your sister's wedding over money? I didn't raise my voice. You destroyed my trust over convenience. Silence. Thick and heavy. He shifted his weight. You're being dramatic. No, I said calmly. I'm being documented. That word hit him harder than anything else I'd said. Documented. Because this wasn't emotional anymore. It was recorded. Time-stamped. Filed. You don't understand what this is doing to us socially, he continued. Socially. Not morally. Not legally. Socially. I understand exactly what you did to me legally, I answered. He ran a hand over his face. For a moment, he looked tired, older, like the confidence had drained out of him. We thought you'd calm down, he admitted quietly. There it was. The assumption. They didn't think I'd actually follow through. They thought I'd threaten. Cry. Argue. Then attend the wedding anyway. Smile for pictures. Pretend none of this happened. You forged my signature while I was unconscious? I said slowly. Why would you expect calm? Because there wasn't one. That evening, my sister called again. This time, she wasn't screaming. She sounded shaken. Vendors are pulling out, she whispered. Some of them downgraded services. People are asking questions. I leaned back against the couch carefully. Did you ever ask why I was in surgery for 9 hours? I asked gently. She hesitated. I I knew it was serious. Did you ask how my recovery was going? Silence. I didn't think you'd take it this far, she said instead. That seems to be a common theme, I replied. She started crying again. I just wanted one perfect day. I swallowed. I wanted one secure home. That ended the conversation. The next morning, Chaos reached its peak. The venue demanded immediate confirmation of payment or reduction of services. The caterer required deposits. The florist requested written assurance. Without access to the frozen funds, my parents had to scramble. Savings accounts shifted. Credit lines stretched. Upgrades disappeared. The luxury wedding they proudly described for months became something smaller, simpler, real. I received dozens of messages that day, some angry, some pleading, some passive aggressive. Family should handle things privately. You're making this bigger than it is. It's just money. I stared at my condo walls, the walls I almost lost without knowing. Money represents time, energy, sacrifice. It represents security. And when someone takes it without consent, they're not just taking currency, they're taking control. Late that afternoon, my mother called. She sounded different, not defensive, not irritated, scared. Mila, she said softly, we're sorry. But not for forging, not for signing. Sorry for the consequences. You should have waited, I replied. We panicked. You planned a wedding for months, I said gently. That's not panic. She started crying. We didn't think you'd fight us. There it was again. That belief. Thought I was too reasonable, too steady to push back. You never had to think about it before. I said quietly. She didn't respond. Because we both knew it was true. For years, I absorbed the imbalance. I didn't demand repayment for small things. I didn't call out favoritism. I didn't force accountability. So when they crossed the biggest line of all, they assumed I'd adjust. They miscalculated. The wedding still happened the next day. Scaled down, whispers circulating, questions hanging in the air. I didn't attend. Instead, I stood alone in my living room without my brace for the first time. My back trembled slightly, but I stayed upright, balanced, strong. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. They thought freezing the money was the crisis. It wasn't. The real crisis for them was realizing I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't the easy daughter anymore. I wasn't the predictable one. I wasn't the quiet backup plan. I was the consequence. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of that. The morning of the wedding, my phone was strangely quiet. No angry calls, no dramatic voice notes, just silence, the kind of silence that comes after panic has burned itself out. I woke up early, even though I had nowhere to be. For a second, I lay still and listened to my own breathing. 3 weeks ago, I woke up in a hospital bed to 73 missed calls. Today, I woke up to none. Funny how quickly power shifts. I sat up slowly, testing my back before standing. The brace rested on the chair beside my bed, but I didn't reach for it right away. I wanted to see how far I'd come. Carefully, I placed my feet on the floor. The hardwood felt cool under my skin. I stood. There was a tremor, a flicker of weakness. But I didn't fall. I didn't need support. Across town, my sister was probably stepping into her dress, adjusting her veil, trying to ignore the tension humming beneath the celebration, because even though the wedding wasn't canceled, it wasn't untouched. The upgrades were gone. The luxury car service? Canceled. The elaborate floral arch replaced with something smaller. The five-course plated dinner reduced to a simpler menu. And none of it happened quietly. Vendors talk. Banks notify. People ask questions when large transfers freeze days before an event. My aunt texted mid-morning. It's still beautiful. You should reconsider coming. I stared at the message. Beautiful. That word used to pull me in. Used to make me soften. Now it just felt like decoration. I typed a simple response. I hope she has a good day. Nothing more. No explanation. No defense. Just distance. Around noon, my father called again. I let it ring once before answering. His voice sounded worn down. This didn't have to happen like this. I leaned against the kitchen counter carefully. It didn't, I agreed. A pause. We're handling it, he added quickly. We figured it out. I didn't doubt that. My parents had always been good at appearances, at adjusting narratives, at making things look intentional instead of forced. But I also knew something they didn't say out loud. They were stretched thin, financially, socially, emotionally. Because when you try to move large sums of money that don't belong to you, the paper trail lingers. You embarrassed us, he said finally. There it was again. Embarrassment. Still no mention of wrongdoing. Still no direct acknowledgement of forging my signature. Just image. Reputation. What embarrassed you? I asked calmly. The truth? He exhaled sharply. You're different, he said. I was, but not in the way he meant it. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't vindictive. I was simply no longer willing to carry their comfort at my expense. I'm healing, I said quietly, in more ways than one. He didn't respond. He hung up. That afternoon, photos started appearing online. Smiles, posed, laughter, carefully angled shots that hid the downgraded details. If you didn't know what had happened, you'd think it was perfect. But I noticed the cracks. The venue looked less grand than originally advertised, the guest count smaller. And in every photo my parents were in, their smiles were tight. Not joyful, just managed. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel revenge. I felt separation, like I was watching a story I used to be part of, but no longer belonged to. Later that evening, my sister called. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She just sounded tired. It happened, she said quietly. We're married. Congratulations, I replied. There was a long pause. It wasn't what we planned, she added. I considered that. Life rarely is. Did you think about what you planned for me? I asked gently. Silence. Then, softer than I'd ever heard her speak to me before, I didn't think you'd actually fight. That sentence again. It almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was consistent. They built their entire decision around one assumption: that I would stay quiet, that I would prioritize peace over fairness, that I would always be the stable one who absorbs the shock. And now they were facing something unfamiliar. Me, with boundaries. I'm not your backup plan, I said softly. She didn't argue. For once, she didn't defend herself. She just breathed into the phone. I guess I never thought of it that way. That was the closest thing to honesty I'd heard from anyone in weeks. After we hung up, I walked slowly to the window. City lights flickered below. Somewhere across town, the reception was probably winding down, music playing, toasts being made, guests leaving with polite smiles. And under all of it, a quiet awareness that something had shifted in our family. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. For years, they made decisions assuming I'd adjust. This time, I didn't adjust. I corrected, and the wedding went on. But nothing was the same. Not for them, not for me. Because the real event wasn't the ceremony. It was the moment they realized I wasn't afraid to stand alone. And that realization, that's what truly changed everything. The day after the wedding was strangely quiet. No dramatic confrontations, no explosive family group chats, just a heavy stillness. It was like everyone had exhaled at the same time. The event had happened. The pictures were posted. The guests had gone home. And now reality remained. I woke up later than usual that morning. My body was still healing. Recovery isn't linear. Some days are strong. Some days feel like you're back at the beginning. But something inside me felt steady. Not triumphant. Not bitter. Just grounded. Around 10 a.m., my lawyer called. The buyers are formally withdrawing from the transaction, he said. They don't want involvement in a fraud case. The reversal process is moving forward. Reversal. That word felt solid. The condo wasn't just frozen in legal limbo anymore. It was coming back. Officially. How long? I asked. A few weeks for final documentation. But it's essentially yours again. Mine again. It was strange how calm I felt hearing that. 3 weeks ago, losing it felt like the ground disappearing beneath my feet. Now, getting it back felt less like victory and more like correction, like something out of place being returned to where it belonged. That afternoon, my mother showed up, alone. No dramatic entrance, no raised voice, just a quiet knock. When I opened the door, she looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. She stepped inside slowly, glancing around like she hadn't been there before. How's your back? She asked. It was the first time she'd asked. 3 weeks too late. It's healing, I replied. She nodded, twisting her hands together. The wedding, it was fine, she said softly. Fine. Not perfect. Not magical. Just fine. I waited. Eventually, she said it. We didn't think you would go through with it. There it was again. That same confession in different words. They assumed I valued peace more than principle. They assumed wrong. You signed my name while I was unconscious, I said calmly. Why wouldn't I go through with it? She swallowed. We thought you'd understand. Your sister was under so much pressure. I tilted my head slightly. And I wasn't. That question lingered between us. She didn't have an answer, because there wasn't one that didn't reveal the truth. They had always prioritized her emotions over my stability, her stress over my sacrifice, her dreams over my boundaries, and they convinced themselves it was fair because I never protested loudly enough. I'm not the strong one anymore, I said quietly. She frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not going to be strong in a way that makes things easier for everyone else. For a moment, I saw something shift in her expression. Not anger, not denial, recognition. You've changed, she whispered. No, I said gently. I stopped adjusting. That hit harder than any accusation. Because it was true. For years, I adjusted. I adjusted expectations. I adjusted boundaries. I adjusted my reactions to make other people comfortable. Now I wasn't adjusting, and that felt foreign to them. She sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. What happens now? She asked. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't manipulative. It sounded uncertain. I thought about that, because that was the real question, wasn't it? Not about money, not about the wedding, about the future. The condo comes back to me, I said evenly. The legal penalties go through, and we all live with what happened. She blinked. You're not dropping it? I held her gaze. No. Her shoulders sagged slightly. Your father didn't think it would go this far. I almost smiled at that. He didn't think I would either. Silence settled between us again. Then she asked something that surprised me. Do you hate us? The question was fragile, honest. I considered it carefully. No, I said. And that was the truth. I didn't hate them. Hatred would have been easier, cleaner. But what I felt was more complicated than that. I just see things clearly now. I added. Clarity isn't loud. It doesn't shout or accuse. It simply removes illusion. She nodded slowly. I guess we always thought you'd land on your feet. I do, I replied. That doesn't mean you get to push me. That sentence lingered long after she left. That night, I walked through my condo slowly, touching the walls again. In a few weeks, the paperwork would finalize. The title would be restored completely. The record corrected. But something else had already changed permanently. They would never assume my silence again. They would never sign for me again. They would never mistake my strength for surrender again. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real restoration. Because the condo coming back wasn't the most important part. It was the shift, the understanding that I wasn't available for sacrifice anymore. The applause from the wedding had faded. The photos were buried under new posts. But the lesson remained. Love without respect becomes entitlement. And entitlement, when challenged, always looks shocked. They weren't shocked because I was cruel. They were shocked because I was clear. And clarity is powerful. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the supporting character in someone else's story. I felt like the author of my own. And this time, no one else was signing my name. 3 months later, I was sitting across from my lawyer when he slid the final document toward me. This is it, he said. Once you sign, the reversal is complete. The condo is officially restored to you. No pending claims. I stared at the paper. It looked ordinary. Black ink. Legal language. My name typed clearly at the top. No shaky imitation. No forged curve in the M. Just mine. It was strange how something so simple could carry so much weight. 3 months ago, I woke up to 73 missed calls and a voicemail that changed everything. Now, I was signing a document that closed the circle. Slowly, carefully, I picked up the pen. For a second, my hand hovered. Not because I was unsure, but because I understood what this moment represented. This wasn't just about property. It was about authority, ownership, consent. I signed. Clean. Steady. Intentional. There, my lawyer said with a small nod. It's done. Done. The penalties against my parents had already been processed, fines issued, records marked, nothing criminal beyond that, but enough to leave a permanent mark, enough to make it clear that family isn't a legal loophole. As I walked out of the office, the air felt lighter, not celebratory, just balanced. Like something that had been tilted too far one way had finally been corrected. When I got home, I didn't immediately tell anyone. Not my parents, not my sister, not extended family, because this wasn't about proving a point anymore. The point had already been made. Later that evening, my father called. His tone was measured. "We got the notice," he said. Of course he did. The official restoration papers were sent to all involved parties. "It's finalized," I replied. A pause. "You really went through with everything." There was no anger in his voice this time, just a quiet realization. "Yes," I said. Another pause. "You could have dropped it." I leaned back in my chair. "And you could have waited until I woke up." Silence. Longer this time. Then, surprisingly, he said something I didn't expect. "I underestimated you." It wasn't an apology, but it was closer to honesty than I'd heard from him before. "I'm not someone to estimate," I replied calmly. "I'm someone to respect." He didn't argue. For once, he didn't defend himself. "I guess we got used to you handling things," he admitted. "Handling things, absorbing things, fixing things, being the stable one. And you confuse that with permission," I said gently. He exhaled slowly. "I don't know how to fix this." That was the first real admission. Not about the money, not about embarrassment, about damage. "You don't fix it with words," I said. "You fix it by not crossing that line again." We ended the call without hostility, not warm, not repaired, but clear. Over the next few weeks, something subtle changed in the family dynamic. No one asked me for money. No one assumed access to my accounts. No one framed requests as obligations. Conversations were cautious, measured, almost respectful. It wasn't love that changed them. It was consequence. And I was okay with that. One evening, my sister came by. No wedding drama this time. No accusations. She sat across from me quietly. "I didn't think about it from your side," she admitted. That was new. "I know," I said. She looked around my condo, taking it in. "You really built this on your own." "Yes." A beat passed. "I guess I always assumed you'd be fine no matter what." That sentence echoed something my mother said months earlier. "They assumed I'd land on my feet. But landing on your feet doesn't mean someone gets to push you off a ledge." "I am fine," I said. "But that doesn't make what happened okay." She nodded slowly. "I didn't know about the other house," she added quietly. I looked at her carefully. "How did you—" "Dad mentioned something about realizing you had more security than they thought. So they found out. Eventually. I hadn't told them, but word travels when pride gets bruised." "And?" I asked. She shrugged slightly. "I guess we didn't know you were that prepared." I almost smiled. "You didn't need to. Preparation doesn't need applause. Security doesn't require announcement. I didn't buy that second house to prove anything. I bought it because something in me always knew I needed independence that couldn't be negotiated." That night, after she left, I stood by the window again. The same place I stood on the wedding night. The city lights looked the same, but I felt different. Stronger, yes, but not hardened, just clearer. I didn't lose my family, but I did lose illusions. The illusion that love means automatic access, the illusion that silence equals peace, the illusion that being the strong one means being unlimited. The condo was restored, the legal process closed, but the real restoration happened inside me. I learned something most people don't learn until much later in life. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are clarity, and clarity is a kind of freedom. They thought selling my condo would secure a wedding. Instead, it secured something else, my independence. And this time, no one could sign that away. Months passed, not in dramatic waves, not in loud arguments, just in small, steady changes. On the outside, everything looked normal again. My sister posted honeymoon photos. My parents resumed hosting Sunday dinners. Relatives stopped whispering. The scandal faded into something people referenced carefully, like a topic you don't bring up unless you're sure it's safe. But inside our family, something fundamental had shifted, and everyone felt it. They were careful with me now. Not warm, not distant. Careful. Conversations had edges, requests had disclaimers. Only if you're comfortable. No pressure, just asking. It would have sounded polite to an outsider, but I knew what it really was. Awareness. They understood now that I wasn't elastic, that I wouldn't stretch endlessly to absorb their decisions. And strangely, that awareness brought a kind of balance. One Sunday, I went to dinner at my parents' house for the first time since everything happened. The air felt different the moment I walked in. My mother hugged me gently, like she wasn't sure how tightly she was allowed to hold on. My father nodded instead of embracing me. Respect can feel awkward when it's new. Dinner conversation stayed light, work updates, travel plans, safe topics. No one mentioned the condo, no one mentioned court filings or frozen accounts, but the silence around it said enough. At one point, my father cleared his throat. "We've been reviewing our estate planning," he said casually, like he was commenting on the weather. I looked up slowly. "Oh, yes," he continued. "We realized we need to be more structured, transparent." Transparent. That word wasn't random. It was a response to documentation, to consequences, to the reality that signatures matter. "I think that's wise," I said evenly. He nodded. And for the first time, I saw something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Not dominance, not dismissal. Consideration. It wasn't affection. But it was progress. Later that evening, as I was about to leave, my mother stopped me at the door. "You were right to protect yourself," she said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Not dramatic, not emotional, just honest. "I shouldn't have needed to," I replied. Her eyes filled slightly. "I know." And for once, I believed she meant it. Driving home, I thought about everything that had happened. They didn't just lose money. They didn't just lose upgrades or social comfort. They lost certainty. They lost the assumption that I would always comply. They lost the version of me that tolerated imbalance. And that loss changed how they moved around me. Back in my condo, I walked through the hallway slowly. The scar on my back had faded into a thin line. The pain was manageable now. Physical therapy had strengthened muscles I didn't know were weak. In a strange way, the surgery and the betrayal mirrored each other. Both exposed vulnerability. Both forced reconstruction. Both left scars. But scars don't mean damage. They mean healing happened. A week later, my sister invited me to coffee. Just the two of us. No audience. No tension. We sat across from each other in a small cafe near my place. "I've been thinking," she said carefully, "about how things always kind of worked in my favor." That was new. I didn't interrupt. "I guess I didn't question it before," she added. "It felt normal." It probably did. When you grow up being prioritized, imbalance feels standard. I didn't question it either, I admitted. She looked surprised. "You didn't?" "No," I said. "I thought being easygoing made me mature." She stirred her coffee slowly. "I didn't realize it made you invisible." That word settled between us. Invisible. Not unloved. Not unwanted. Just overlooked. There's a difference. "I'm not invisible anymore," I said quietly. She nodded. "No, you're not." There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful apology scene, just acknowledgement. And sometimes acknowledgement is enough to start something different. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the voicemail again. "You were unconscious, so we signed for you." At the time, those words shattered me. Now, they felt like a turning point, because without that moment, I might have continued being the stable one, the quiet one, the predictable one. Instead, I became something else. Clear, bounded, unmovable when it mattered. They thought they were securing a wedding. They thought they were protecting family harmony. But what they really did was force me to choose myself. And once you learn how to do that, you don't unlearn it. They lost control. They lost assumptions. They lost access without permission. But I gained something far more valuable than $425,000. I gained clarity about who I am when pushed. I gained proof that I can stand alone, legally, financially, emotionally. And most importantly, I gained a new definition of family, one that includes respect or nothing at all. It's been a year now, a full year since I woke up in that hospital bed to 73 missed calls, a year since I pressed play on a voicemail that split my life into before and after. People think the biggest moment was the lawsuit, or the wedding fallout, or the condo being returned. It wasn't. The biggest moment was quieter than that. It was the moment I stopped asking, how could they do this to me? And started asking, why did I believe I had to tolerate it? That shift changed everything. When I walk through my condo these days, it feels different. Not because the walls changed, not because the furniture moved, but because I did. This place used to represent security. Now it represents authority. Before, it was proof that I worked hard. Now, it's proof that I protect what I build. There's a difference. Security can be taken, authority has to be challenged. And when it was challenged, I didn't collapse. I responded. The scar on my back has faded into a thin silver line. Most days, I barely notice it. But sometimes, when I catch it in the mirror, I pause. Because that scar and this condo share something. They were both cut into, and both healed stronger. We still have Sunday dinners, but they're different now. Subtle, measured, respectful in a way that feels almost unfamiliar. No one makes jokes about my finances anymore. No one says, Mila will figure it out. They ask. They clarify. They check. It's small, but it matters. One evening, a few months ago, my father brought up a potential family investment idea. Before the betrayal, he would have assumed my contribution. This time, he looked directly at me and said, only if you're comfortable. It was a simple sentence, but it carried acknowledgement. He knew he couldn't assume. He knew I would walk away if boundaries blurred again. Consequences don't just punish. They educate and sometimes they reshape entire dynamics. My sister and I are different, not distant, not overly close. Just honest in a way we weren't before. A few months ago, she admitted something that stuck with me. I didn't think about how often you were expected to adjust, she said. I just thought that was your personality. It was, because I shaped it that way. I wore low maintenance like a badge of honor. I thought being easygoing made me strong. But strength without limits becomes exploitation. Now, when she vents about something, I listen. But I don't automatically fix. When she asks for advice, I give it. But I don't sacrifice for it. And strangely, she respects me more for that. Sometimes people don't value what's constantly available. They value what's chosen. Yes, they eventually found out about the second house, not from me, from paperwork that surfaced during financial reviews. The day my father realized I had another fully paid property under my name, he looked stunned. You didn't trust us? He asked. That question almost made me laugh. Trust wasn't the issue. Pattern recognition was. I trusted myself, I replied. That answer bothered him more than any lawsuit ever did, because independence, when it's quiet, feels like distance to people who are used to control. But I didn't buy that house out of spite. I bought it out of awareness, and awareness saved me. Even though I never needed to use it as emergency housing, knowing it existed gave me something powerful during that legal fight. Calm. They thought they'd left me with nothing, but I was never empty-handed. And that's the part they'll never fully understand. The hardest lesson wasn't about money. It wasn't about fraud. It wasn't about embarrassment. It was about identity. For most of my life, I saw myself as the dependable one, the stable one, the mature one, the one who keeps peace. But peace without fairness isn't peace. It's suppression. And suppression always builds pressure. That voicemail was the crack in the wall. The surgery exposed physical vulnerability. The betrayal exposed emotional vulnerability. But vulnerability doesn't make you weak. Ignoring it does. The moment I called the lawyer wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my voice. Because consent isn't implied, it's explicit. And if someone takes it from you, even family, You corrected, not loudly, not violently, but firmly. People ask that sometimes, quietly, carefully. Do you regret taking it that far? No. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. If I had backed down, here's what would have happened. They would have believed my boundaries were flexible. My sister would have assumed my stability was communal property. My silence would have reinforced their entitlement. Instead, something else happened. They learned I document. They learned I don't bluff. They learned love doesn't cancel legality. And most importantly, I learned I don't abandon myself to maintain approval. I didn't lose a condo. I didn't even lose my family. I lost illusions. The illusion that sacrifice equals love. The illusion that being strong means being unlimited. The illusion that keeping peace keeps you safe. It doesn't. Clarity keeps you safe. Documentation keeps you safe. And clarity is expensive. It cost me comfort. It cost me being seen as easy. But it gave me something better: self-respect. Sometimes I think about how small the fix could have been. If they had just waited 24 hours, if they had just respected my voice, none of this would have happened. The wedding would have been smaller from the beginning, the tension would have been avoided, the legal record would have remained clean. But they didn't wait. They chose convenience over consent, and that choice changed the trajectory of everything. Not because I exploded, but because I enforced. Today, I move differently. I speak differently. I don't over-explain my boundaries. I don't soften my no. I don't volunteer sacrifice to prove love. And here's the most surprising part: the people who truly care stayed. The ones who valued access more than respect adjusted, or stepped back. Either way, balance was restored. I still visit my parents. I still text my sister, but I do it as an equal, not as a resource, not as a backup plan, not as a silent guarantor, as Mila, fully aware, fully capable, fully unwilling to sign away my voice. Ever again. If there's one thing this taught me, it's this: when someone says, "You would have agreed," what they really mean is, "We didn't want to ask." And if you let that slide once, it becomes a pattern. I broke the pattern. Not with screaming, not with cruelty, but with consequence. And sometimes consequence is the purest form of clarity. They sold my condo while I was unconscious. They thought I'd wake up and adjust. Instead, I woke up and changed. And that made all the difference.